It is really fun to see this room full. It is really fun to see two dear friends on stage. But in true RV fashion, I want us to welcome both of them as our guests. You see, we have a little tradition that we prepay with a standing ovation. That way we set the expectation for what we're going to hear. But we started this tradition 20 years ago, and it's a nice, warm way to show our love and our appreciation for you guys to be here. Andrea, I'm going to start with you. You were the most senior B of A person for many, many years in Charlotte. You and I have collaborated in many of projects. Most recently, you volunteer or voluntold to run the Charlotte Alliance by someone maybe sitting to your left. But there's very, very few people in Charlotte that have had as much of a visible and invisible hands on things that have happened. It is a great privilege to have you here. I consider you one of the real gems of our city. So welcome to Charlotte, to Red Ventures.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And to my right, they started calling Michael Jordan the Hugh McColl of basketball. So the GOAT of Charlotte and the GOAT of many other things. I remember Hugh when I first got here in early in 1999, 2000, and all you really cared about was to make sure that I was going to care about this city. And that's all you wanted to talk about, even though we were a startup and had nothing. And you were fantastic at welcoming me and many others, and really set the example of what it is to commit to something bigger than yourself. So your legacy lives in many ways, but it lives through many of us that care deeply about our city, and it lives through your example. So Hugh, you need no introduction, but welcome to Red Ventures.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna start with a confession. So for those of you who have heard of the podcast, we've done 50 some episodes, and my favorite episode was the episode with you. And I felt that I got to see a Hugh that day that very few people get to see. And it was wonderful. So even if you had not heard our podcast, I'm not asking you to go listen to it. If you want to get to know Hugh, go listen to that podcast, and you hear a lot of the history and story of this great city. So let's get going. I don't know, when you walked in, you saw that we talk about a series of beliefs as kind of the connective tissue in our portfolio of companies. And those two beliefs, one of them about leaving the woodpile higher than you found it, and then the second one about being the change you want to see in the world, are really what I think separates Red Ventures from other companies that are out there, meaning we care deeply for the greater good. We have to do well ourselves, but it's on the benefit of the greater good. I think the conversation today is really rooted on community involvement and civic engagement. And you two have been at the forefront of that for our city since I've been here for 27 years. So I want to start today by getting to know you guys, because a lot of people don't know you guys nearly as well. So Andrea, let's start with you. How did you end up in Charlotte?
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is an interesting story. So I graduated from college in 1988, and I had worked at a small bank all through college. And I got an offer from the big bank in town called First Republic Bank. So I took it. This is going to get $2,000 more than a small bank. And I got there, and my job had already been eliminated. I got there the first morning, and they said, your job's been eliminated. We need you to be a computer programmer. And I said, well, do you have to have any qualifications for that? And they said, no, here's the book, go ahead. And it was 4GL, programming. COBOL-C, Fortran, the green blinking light. Fast forward 6 weeks, and our bank fails. I think you can see why. They're putting unqualified people in jobs. Lucky for me, we failed, and NCNB was the buyer. So Hugh bought me 6 weeks into my career. And that's when we became Nations Bank. And I have to say, it was an incredible journey because Hugh and I drove out here together, and we were talking about the fact that starting with that venture west, which was the furthest NCNB had gone at that time, because that was North Carolina National Bank, then we became Nations Bank. We started buying everything, CNS Sovereign, Barnett, Boatman's, Maryland National, and I got the privilege to work on the transition team, starting in Texas. So Texas had 141 single chartered state banks under the auspice of First Republic. So we had to consolidate all of those. And from there, I went, ran HR, did all these things, and had an incredible career. But I will say, the biggest thing that came out of me at Bank of America was I grew up there. Bank of America's values were my values. Being involved in the community was what we did. And, you know, we have this whole mantra, you know, take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers, they'll take care of your shareholders. And at the end of the day, we're going to make every community where we live and work better than it was when we got there. And Hugh had the vision. He also had the people that could execute, which is rare, having both of those things. And so to me, it was a privilege growing up at this company, but I felt a great accountability to give back into every community in which I lived and worked, which I think is what you see in the person I am today.
That is crazy. That is a good story. You're right, Hugh. Hugh, when you look at your journey and who you are and how you got here, I would love for you to share with us the through line of that. What was it about you, about your upbringing, about the way you view the world that manifested itself through kind of how you have lived?
Well, I don't really know how to answer that question. I will say this. I went to the University of North Carolina, the University of North Carolina. So
hey, you're in the board of UNCC. What? Now.
Just want to be clear. Grew up in Tennesseeville, South Carolina. We were in the cotton business. We did, and we owned farms, and we owned a bank or two. And being really honest, I thought because of being the oldest son, by right of primogeniture, I would come home and run the family empire. Anyway, in long story short, I went to college. I had an unblemished C average, although I got there. I made some D's, and I made 2 A's, one in math and finance and one in accounting. So that sort of took care of the D's I had in economics. But anyway, I went to the Marine Corps, and I was officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. And I remember coming home just about a week before I was getting out of the Marine Corps, and my father said, "Son, what are you going to do when you get out of the Marine Corps?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I thought I'd come home and help you." He said, "We're getting along fine without you." And that's the first time that I knew that I had to have a job. So he told me, he said, "You need to go up there and talk to the American Trust Company and get yourself a job at the bank." He was telling me what to do. I might add that when I went to the University of North Carolina, I only went up there and registered. I never applied. I went on the last day you could go to register, and because we could write a check to get in and then let you in, and the registrar asked me what I wanted to major in, and my father said he wants to major in banking and finance. They asked me where I wanted to live. He said he wants to live in 329 Ruffin, which was where he had lived in 1927. So my 2 brothers who followed me all did the same thing. We all majored in banking and finance. We all lived in 329 Ruffin. We all went to work for the bank. We all got kicked out of the house. Anyway, the first time I knew I needed a job, I went and interviewed, and I was told by the personnel officer, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And I think I've gone further than anybody you know that has never had a successful job interview. I never got offered a job, so I came home and told my father I wasn't getting a job, and I was going to Europe because I'd won $45,000 and take a poker game on an aircraft carrier. We went to some way out of Lebanon. Anyway, went to Europe. I met this girl on June the 3rd. I married her October the 3rd, and I've been married 66 years. So I'm trying to shorten this story, but it's hard to shorten it. Anyway, my father, we were very big customers of the American Trust Company and owned a couple of banks and things. So he called up the chairman and said, I understand you don't want to hire my son. And he said, of course we do. That's how I got a job. And so I came to Charlotte, newly married. I got married 30 days after getting here. And I never got any money from home. Daddy never gave me a dime. And I managed to lose all that money speculating in the market in the second year I was here. And so I had to go to work. And so that's what I've been doing ever since I got here, working, trying to catch up. Anyway, that's sort of my story.
I love that story. What a great story. Go ahead.
I want to tell one more thing about how I grew up.
You can have the whole afternoon. Don't worry.
My grandmother told me she believed that McColl was sent here by God to run the world, and I was young and I believed her. And so I always was in charge from the time I was a little boy. I would say, we'd go and play baseball. I'd say, John and I'll pick up. John, you go first. But I would appoint myself captain. And I ended up being president of my student body 4 years in a row, and president of my class 4 years in a row, and president of my student body, and president of my fraternity. So I kind of got used to being in charge, and I tried to stay there. It helps. You're in charge. Anyhow,
Are you in charge at home?
No.
Oh.
When grandmother was dying, this is the way to understand how I grew up. I raced home to get to the hospital in time before she died. And as I went in to see her, I said, Grandmother, how you doing? She said, oh, son, I'm so glad to see you. Do you think General Motors is going to declare an extra dividend this year? So I grew up around business. So that's my story.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Andrea, let's get a little bit more connected to what we want to talk about today. You care so deeply about Charlotte, and I get it that your values and B of A's have been, intertwined. But why do you give so much of your energy and yourself to this city? And
I think, the company, like I said, and my values are intertwined, but my mother was a social worker. And we always had people at our house, the kids in need, families in need. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had space for everyone. And so we always gave back at home, starting at a young age, volunteering in the community. And I saw what a difference that made in people's lives. And so it's just something I grew up with. And so, being at the bank all these years and being able to do that from the platform of the bank, being out in the community, changing lives for the better, whether it's helping a family buy their first home, or helping someone get to college, or get a car, or pay off debt, or getting a job. I mean, all of these things are life-changing. I had the opportunity to chair the Leading on Opportunity Council for the first 5 years, which is all about economic mobility and creating jobs and opportunities for people. And so it's just been in my blood. And I care so deeply about what's happening in Charlotte because I see the promise and the potential of what we can be. We have a whole group of people that have been left behind. Hugh's spent a lot of time in the community in the last, forever, and I've been with him in the community a lot in the last 5, 7, 8 years. And I can see what we need to do. I can understand the issues better than I ever have. And I think we're at an inflection point. We've got a group of people that feel left behind, and we've got 157 people moving here every single day. And it's only going to continue to grow. And unless we do something collectively together and something big, we are going to leave more people behind. And I can see that. I can see it on the table. I can see that there's issues. I hear all sides of this, what growth means. But I think collectively, if we all get educated and if we work together, we have the opportunity to make this city and this region something great for the next 50 years.
Look, I'll interject. I think Charlotte is one of the great cities in the world. It's one of the great cities to raise a family. It's a great city to start a business. It's a great city to be from, but to kind of be adopted by. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful place, and we tend to think about other places, and I'll stack Charlotte against anybody. It has its pros and cons. But when you look back, there have been in history, Hugh, really important events that have kind of made up the tapestry of what Charlotte is today. And today we're going to talk about one because I think we want to talk about the upcoming election, but we'll get to it in a minute. I want to talk about some of those things that have made Charlotte Charlotte. Maybe over the last, we can go as far back. I'll start with one, and I want you to comment on it, and then we can build from there. I think your decision, and maybe you can give context on what was happening with the banking laws, of making what ended up being Nations Bank and B of A kind of the anchor of the city, and I know First Union also evolved, became a major kind of building block for this city. So give everybody a little bit of context, because you walk around thinking, oh, B of A is headquartered in Charlotte. Well, how did we get here?
Well, it's really simple, in a funny sort of way. The company I came to work for, the American Trust Company, is the Bank of America. In other words, we didn't come here from somewhere else. We've always been here. The headquarters has been here through all these. I think when I retired, I'd bought 1,085 banks. I don't like to correct my partner, but there were 142 banks in Texas, not 121. But anyway,
sorry.
Who's the boss?
Anyway, when I came here, Charlotte was a small town, but it was the biggest one I knew of, and so I remember going to New York very early in my career, and I went to lunch at one of the big New York banks, and I felt looked down upon because we were just they treated us, and because I was Southern and had a deep grit accent, they couldn't understand me. They treated me like I was dumb, and it irritated me. And so I decided we're going to do something about that. And so I ran our national and international divisions, and until I was president of the bank, I really didn't have anything to do with Charlotte. I was always out. And it's when I really got my vision for what I thought Charlotte ought to be like from London and from New York and San Francisco, where people lived over their shops and lived downtown. And so I had it in my head that we should be living downtown. And after I was president, my work turned more toward being here in Charlotte a lot. But I was not the top gun. I was number 2 or 3. And I didn't have anything to do, so I started working on developing the city. And that's when I got interested in it. And our first project really of significance was taking 4th Ward, which really had only about 6 houses in it, and turning it into a development downtown and moving people in there. And we did that by selling money at 6% in a 13% world. Interest rates were 13%. We worked out how to lend the money to the city, who then loaned it to the borrower. And what that did was eliminated taxation, and we were able to build that part of the city. We ultimately built 3 neighborhoods, 3rd Ward and then 1st Ward and Lasker.
Hey, if I can interrupt you, what would Charlotte look like? What would be an equivalent today's city?
Well, when I came here, you could fire a shotgun down Tryon Street at 5 o'clock, never hit a soul. It was, and we had more churches and bars. You couldn't buy whiskey by the drink. You couldn't dance to live music. It was the most boring place I'd ever been in my whole life. So, I mean, I'm being serious. That's what it was like. Anyhow, we set out to change it. I always like to say that Charlotte has always been run by people from somewhere else. We're all from somewhere else. You and I are from somewhere else. Andrea's from somewhere else. And so everybody here got here from somewhere else. So it's our city in a funny sort of way.
Yeah.
We did it, and so we wanted it to be a better place. But we've always had this big inferiority complex, and I remember being stunned to find that people were upset that Charlotte was not on the #1 bomb list for the Russians. The fact of it, we were not going to get hit till the second wave. It hurt our feeling of importance, and so I now know we're on the list. So we've come a long way. But anyhow, that's kind of how I got started. But I wanted the city, I always give credit to the guy who really made a difference, and that was a guy named Gooley O'Dell, who was an architect, A.G. O'Dell. He had a 1966 plan. He told us where to put the art districts, where to put the housing, where to do everything. And it was a great plan, and we had the sort of a confluence of Harvey Gantt became mayor in 1987. And I became chairman of the board in 1983. And I became chairman of the board in 1983. And so we had the confluence of a mayor who had majored, who had advanced degrees in urban planning, and had a banker who wanted to change the face of Uptown. And I had a lot of money and he had a lot of brains. And so we did it together. So that's kind of what that was, at least in a nutshell. But since we wanted to do things our way, we had to figure out how to get everybody to agree with us. So we created a group of people. I don't know how we actually did it. But Bill Lee, who ran Duke Energy, and Ed Crutchfield, who ran First Union, and Rolf Neal, who ran the Charlotte Observer, and I formed a little group, and we invited John Belk to be part of it, who ran everything. But John was really against things as opposed to form, so we would always co-opt him by making him chairman of something, or so that he would have to be for it. And that's how we ended up running the city. But we did a good job.
I love it. I love it. Andrea, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think what gets kind of glossed over here is that Hugh and Harvey executed against the O'Dell plan. I mean, it was a great plan, but it had been sitting there until they came along and put their heft behind it and executed it. And you can go to the top of the corporate center, which Hugh built, and look out the window, and Hugh can tell you everything around used to be, I'm pretty sure, an asphalt parking lot.
Hugh, I can imagine that when you built that tower in downtown Charlotte, people thought you were crazy, that was a waste of money, that you were not being responsible. Was that true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they thought that, for sure. And I didn't want just a tall building. I wanted a skyscraper, and that's why I hired Caesar Pelli, who was a great architect, and I give him total credit for that. That building is timeless, and it still looks good. I told him I wanted it to reek of power and money and be warm and friendly. And I think he did that for me. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And
what was the cost of that building?
I can't remember exactly, but I'm thinking around 45 million to close to, maybe closer to 100 million. But was it 90? 90 something million. Anyway, whatever it was, it didn't really matter.
But that's a good point. That's a good point because, look, those investments at the time have a lot of naysayers. And your point just there, it's an interesting one. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. Because it literally, in many ways, meant a lot more than just that building. It was Charlotte a rival as a city that mattered.
We should make this point. Charlotte has always had a good government, and we had great city managers, and we couldn't have done it. The group couldn't have done what it did without a great city manager. And Wendell White was one of them, and I think David Burkholder was that his name, and then the woman that followed him. When you're 90, you have a hell of a time with names. I'm going to tell you all that. But anyway, When you're 90, you have a hell of a time with everything. But anyway, it's, we got a lot done with it, but that government has served us well. And also we had in North Carolina a law that you could annex the property adjacent to you without the vote of the people being annexed. And that allowed, that kept us from having white flight. And that was important for Charlotte. And it's why our city still has its best neighborhoods right flush up against the, against
the city.
Anyway, those are just some of the things that came into play.
You know, the other thing that I think you did very deliberately that is just one of a few cities in America have are professional sports teams right next to a symphony, right, you know, and the way you built and architected all of that to be within walking distance.
I think we're the only city in the United States where you can walk to the symphony, the opera, the ballet, pro football, pro basketball, and pro baseball. We're the only city in America. You think about it. I mean, if you're in New York, you got to go to New Jersey to see the football grounds play. And it's interesting. But anyway.
That is great.
It's a great city.
Andrea, I'm curious, in your time here, what do you think what's another very consequential thing that happened in Charlotte that may or may not have been popular at the time, that has become part of the tapestry?
Well, I would say this, that busing to integrate the schools was very controversial, but in fact was very beneficial for the entire population. And candidly, since we stopped busing, we've resegregated ourselves socioeconomically, and that is not good. And so it was very unpopular at the time, and yet we know it was a tremendous benefit to the city and to its population. And so that's one of the issues we have. I'd just like to add, I don't think any society is successful and can be said to be successful unless it looks after the least advantaged people in that society. And I'm afraid we're losing our sight on that, because when I used to go to church and I'd ask people, why do y'all like this town, the one that you couldn't dance to live music in and whatever, they would say it's a great place to raise a family. But what we've learned is it's not a great place for everybody to raise a family, and that's one of the issues that's in front of us and will remain in front of us unless we turn our time to it and really attack it full force.
Yeah. You know, another important jewel of Charlotte that I don't think a lot of people understand was at very, very high risk 15 years ago. I don't remember the time. It's our airport. And a city that's just what separates Charlotte from Pittsburgh, from Cleveland, from many other cities, even Raleigh, in terms of its ability to have a hub. And that airport was at major risk when U.S. Airways was about to get acquired by Delta. And if they had acquired that airport, it would all consolidate to Atlanta. And it was a done deal. And it was at the last minute that Americans stepped up and needed an eastern hub, southeastern hub, because they had New York. And I look back and I am now studying all these big things that have happened in our city that you look back and say, wow, that would have turned out really, really different if we had shrunken an airport and didn't have kind of the vibrancy there. Andrea, what others? Sports teams is something that you think mattered here?
Well, I do think sports teams matter, and I think this is another example. You know, we have the Panthers today because of the deal that Hugh struck with Jerry Richardson on a napkin. See, literally. I'm pretty sure you pinned the deal on a napkin, and he didn't come in and fill out any forms, but that was, there's a lot of things he did that I don't think we should talk broadly about, but it worked, and we got them, and they were an anchor, because if you look at cities with professional sports teams and then those that don't have them, you see a huge difference in attracting other companies to come here, attracting other people, job creation. There's another thing, Rick, that I think is really important that you touched on and that Hugh mentioned that I think is really differentiating us today, and that's the small group of people that Hugh had together when they were making decisions. And, 5, 6, 7 of you that did that. Well, that stopped when Hugh left. And we had, a lot of great CEOs in town doing what they wanted to do, making good progress with their own companies. But not until Lynn Good came back together and reconstituted a group, which now, Rick, you're on the CELC, the CEO Leadership Council, which is a way to bring everyone together, even if their companies have different things they're interested in or they might invest in. But it's an aggregate group of leaders that's looking out, I think, for the well-being of this city. And I think that is something that we lost for a while that we now have back. And you've got alumni of the CELC that are often doing things, and it's a way to develop and continue developing younger leaders and putting them in positions to make decisions that will be the future leaders of our city.
Well said, and I don't think Lynn gets enough credit because she was the one who resurrected it, and Lynn just retired from Duke Energy and a wonderful civic leader in our city. But I think people don't understand that becomes the platform by which corporate Charlotte is able to connect together, and does a lot in CMS, does a lot in many different areas. And that was the transformation from the early version that you and others led. But I want to come back to a point because the stuff, Charlotte has something that everybody needs to understand. We have the largest city without a full-time mayor. And what that means is that we have a weak form of government. Weak not as in bad, weak as it is not a heavy political government. So Charlotte, Hugh was talking about, the city manager really ultimately is the person responsible for the city. Now, we're even more complex, and sometimes there's people that want to solve it because our county runs half the things and our city runs half the things. The overlap is not 100%. Sometimes they don't get along. But the CLC in many ways acts as the conduit and as the referee in many big issues. And friction and stuff is important because everybody has different agendas. I think the form of government of Charlotte is one of its secret assets. And I know you and I have talked about, many people are like, oh, we should go to a strong mayor. And you're like, no way. But do you want to say something about that, Hugh?
Well, yes, but I want to go back and say it just to make a point. Michael Marsicano and I went to see Lynn Good on the day she became Chief Executive Officer of Duke and told her, it's going to be your job to run the city now. We're retiring. And so I don't want you, I shouldn't try to take credit for it. It's just a fact, though. Now, and I think we did a good job on picking her. Anyhow.
Form of government.
I think this about our government. We've had one mayor that stole money in all these years. But it's enough of a message to remind you don't really want a permanent mayor because it might be a bad one. But our city government does a good job in doing their job, but they do a poor job when they think they're micromanaging, if you follow me. And so we have this difficulty with the government form we have, but it's still the best one you could possibly have because look at the success we've had. And we seem to be able to reach conclusions after we have to do a lot of talking, but that's okay because that's what's good for us, is listening to other people's opinion. Sometimes you learn something. And so we're forced to do that. The city council is forced to do that. And the city manager has to pay attention to everybody in the city, not just people in one district or another.
Right.
And I think that's very important. So I'm highly in favor of our form of government. I think it works. We should not change it.
I agree with that, and I think we've got a unique situation, as you mentioned, Rick, with the county owning about half the things, the city owning about half the things, and we had some turnover, and I think we've got a better partnership now with the city and the county than we've had before, which is allowing us to do more things together, looking at things differently, whether it's economic development, whatever the topic may be. We've got willing participants ready to not do things the way they've always been done, but to try something different for the good of the citizens.
All right, we're going to pivot and we're going to dig in a little bit into the issue of the moment in our city. Let me be very clear. I'm asking you, challenging you, maybe begging you to go vote. You vote whatever you think you need to vote. You should get educated. Midterm elections, the voter turnout in midterm elections here is sub 10%. Which is not great if we really want to be in charge of the civic leadership of our city. There's an issue on the ballot which is not an easy issue. There's two sides to this issue. Oftentimes there's three sides to this issue. This one only has two. And you should really get educated, and I hope that you exercise your vote as a way of exercising your civic leadership. What I want to talk about is a little bit of the context of this vote, and then I want you guys to weigh in. But as a general sense, we as Charlotte, one of the downsides is we're not the capital of the state. Basically, anything we want to do as a city, we got to get clearance from Raleigh. Especially if you're going to tax the citizens, or especially if you're going to do anything that has any implication statewide. The relationship between Raleigh and Charlotte has been frictional for a long time. And there's three sides to the story, right? But the reality is that we have worked really hard to both mend fences, create bridges, create common understanding so that Raleigh allows Charlotte to put an issue on the ballot. My point is, this is a once in a long time opportunity that may pass. This won't come back in 2 years and 4 years. That doesn't mean anything other than it's an important context of this has been a year and a half worth of a lot of diplomacy in Raleigh to allow Charlotte to make its own decision, whatever that decision is. So that's important context. The other context is, look, the bill, if passed, will have about a $20 billion impact in terms of raising funds. It's a 1% sales and use tax. It does not apply to groceries. It does not apply, for whatever reason, to cars. And it does not apply to medicines. Right? This applies to more entertainment and leisure type stuff, but it's an important element. I'm just trying to put the facts on the table. Of the $19 billion that it will raise, is it over 10 years, Andrea, or 15? Over 30 years, $19 billion over 30 years. The federal funds of $6 billion will be matched. So if it passes, there'll be federal funds of $6 billion. So think about $25 billion over 30 years. 40% of the money will be for roads, and just you see all the construction. 40% will be for rail and high capacity transit, and 20% will be for bus and public interest. So $25 billion. The way I see it, 20%, which is the $6 billion, is you get the federal government to build you a bus system for free. But that's one thing about it. And then the other way that is important is, of the $19 billion that we as citizens, if this passes, will have to pay, and is not insignificant, 30% will come from visitors and people that are here for work, right? So it's really 70% of the $19 billion over 30 years that is our responsibility as citizens of this city. Facts, everybody kind of understands the facts of this, very consequential and somewhat controversial in some places. Last data point I will put out there is, it's estimated that for an average Charlottean, this will cost you about $25 a month. For somebody that is, not the lowest of income, but more moderate income, it will be $12 a month. So that's the way you can think about what impact would it have to me in my pocket. Did I miss any facts?
Yeah.
No, you got them all. I'm just learning.
We're numbers oriented here.
Let's do a couple of things. First of all, a bus fare is $2.20. Seniors and students, $1.10. And roads, when we say roads, it also means sidewalks. It means bike lanes. It means synchronized green lights. It means stop signs, it means crosswalks. So roads is a very broad category. Buses, I can say, is increasing the frequency of buses. Right now there's one bus route where the bus runs every 15 minutes. This would go to add 17 more. It would add buses in different places, different neighborhoods that don't have bus access. It would go from taking students within 10 minutes of one high school to all but one high school being within 10 minutes of walking distance to get off the bus. So,
Okay. So both of you worked really hard on this bill. Hugh, what do you think? How should people think of this issue in the arc of time, in the journey of the city?
Well, I think it involves several issues. One of which, as you know, is housing, affordable housing. And as it becomes more and more difficult for people to afford to live closer to the center of the city or to the city itself, it means that they have further to go to work, and yet there's no means of transportation for them to get to work. And they have children they need to get to daycare centers. And those are things that are very important. And I think the city will die if we don't provide the transportation. And I think, candidly, buses is going to be number one on the issue to get work on that immediately, to be able to move people from distance. Now, if I were running Gaston County, I would want to build the railroad to my county because it would be a bedroom town for Charlotte. But for some reason they don't want to pay for it. But at the end of the day, it's something we need desperately if we're to maintain our growth and maintain our quality of life for all of our citizens. So this is something we should be in favor of.
Hugh, if you wanted to argue the other side of this, what will be the main valid issue on the other side of the argument?
Well, I think there are two issues. One is what the people do with the money, what they should do with it. So that's one of the issues. But that's always the case with tax revenue. So I mean, it's not a new issue. It's just a regular old issue. That's one of the issues. The second one, I guess, is that asking, is it worth it to make everything cost whatever it is, 1% more, and I think that's really the question that will revolve with most people. But I don't see that ultimately. I think it'd be made up in higher wages and better opportunities, to be very honest. So, but those are the two issues I see.
Yeah. Andrea, how do you assess this bill?
Well, excuse me.
no, go ahead.
No, I don't have anything.
Well, if I could just add on the first point that you made of why people would be skeptical, which I can understand, who's going to be managing this money? The city will be managing the road money, all the towns. So it's Mecklenburg County that all will get road money. But there will be a new authority that will be managing the bus and the rail money. And that's an elected body of 27 people. And the county will elect people, the city will elect people, the CLC, the Alliance will put people on, Raleigh has put a few people on. So that will be a different authority that I think will be providing transparency, reporting around how those dollars are used. I think, Rick, it's, not every neighborhood travels the same. There's not the same transportation modes in every neighborhood. There's different issues everywhere. To me, the thing that I'm focused the most on are jobs, getting people to jobs, making it easy for them to get there, making it easy for them to get home, not waiting in the rain for an hour and a half, not missing a bus because it doesn't come and not getting to work. I think if this passes, will also create a lot of new jobs, mobility adjacent jobs, landscape jobs, cleaning jobs, structure jobs, road jobs, bus driver jobs, train jobs. And that's exciting for our community. We've got a lot of people that have done a lot of work on increasing minimum wage on jobs, but when people can't get to the job, then we're not making a difference.
You can look back at Selby the B of A skyscraper, crazy idea that you had, or the amount of investment at the airport, or sports teams. These things all have naysayers, and they're valid naysayers. There's good arguments on the other side of this. 1% tax on people that cannot afford what they have today is a tough argument. Right? That's not an easy just, okay, that $12 to some families a month means something. It means a meal, it means something, right? So I don't think we can make light of it. But I think your argument is an interesting one, which is, look, this is how progress happens. This is how better jobs happen. This is how more jobs happen. And it will be a race at the bottom otherwise. And my challenge when I think about it, because I can see both sides of this argument, is, first of all, that $6 billion from federal funds goes away. The window is now, it goes away. So ultimately, we're getting like a 20% free federal government money. Second is, I don't know when Raleigh will let us vote on this again. And maybe in 3, 4, 5 years, or maybe a long time from now. And this is the kind of issue that 157 people moving here every single day. Imagine a Boeing plane landing and everybody's moving here. It doesn't take that many years from the quality of life here to continue to degrade. And if we don't have way to move people, and if we don't have ways to move everybody, because everybody here can afford a car, I think we will become a city that will be so congested it will be hard to live, and the quality of life of the city will continue to degrade. So that's how I have thought about the issue. Can we, Hugh, voter turnout to me is something that I think I would love to impress on everybody here. Why is an important responsibility for us to take on, and not just us, our families, our neighbors, to become advocates of, you can't complain if you don't vote, or you can't criticize if you don't use your vote. What advice would you give us here?
Well, I think it's straightforward what you said. I think it's the one thing that we have that we should use, and that's our vote. Because if you don't vote, you really are not due an opinion about anything. Because otherwise, you're just standing on the sideline watching somebody else make a decision for you. So I think voting is very important, and I hope everybody will do that and encourage your friends to do it. I want to be sure and pick up on something you said about the airport. And that is that I want to give John Belk credit. John Belk really pushed the airport and really brought that home for us. So I want to just go back and say that. But if you think about the times we've had opportunities to do things that the city voted for, most of them have been very, very positive for our city, like building the arenas, building the football stadium, things like that, all have benefited the city in many different ways, not only entertainment, but producing revenues for the city. So I think that transportation is more important than almost anything, and you could even argue more than housing, because without the transportation, the housing is meaningless. You can't build something if you can't get there from here. So anyway, I think we should all work hard and go vote for this issue.
I would add just a couple things that, I've been surprised as I've gotten into this about the low voter turnout that Rick talked about earlier. And, it's because typically when there's not a presidential election or a Senate election, it's not as, as sexy for people to get out and vote. And in fact, this election, your voice is more important, I would say, than a statewide or even a national one because of what's on the ballot. To Rick's point, if we don't do this now, we lose the $6 billion, we lose the opportunity that Raleigh gave us, not sure when we will get it back. And I have been, as I said, in the community a lot, and there's been talk about, why do we have to do 1 cent? Maybe we could do a quarter cent. And my argument there is, we've never done anything incrementally in this city. We think big, we deliver big, and that's why we are where we are today. If we go backwards from that, we have 157 people moving here every day. It's gonna get worse, and guess what? It's gonna get more expensive if we ever get this opportunity to do it again. So I think now is the time. I think if you vote no, that's great, at least you vote. Get your friends, get your family. This is a time for us to show up and put our voices to work.
Wonderful. Hopefully that was helpful as you think about this. I want to close out. We got about 5 minutes, and I want to get out of that issue and come back. And you talked about New York and London and the great cities in the world that inspire a vision, that underdog mentality, will show you kind of thing. 25 years from now, you're looking at this city. What do you hope it's the combination of what? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What do you hope it is?
Well, what I really hope, let me just say this, when you get to be 90, one of the things it does for you, it gives you a long look back, and you see your mistakes, and you see your company's mistakes, you see your country's mistakes. And as I've spent my life trying to change things, I realize that we always have the same issues, which are housing, transportation, jobs, and schooling, education. And I conclude that what we really need to work on more than any single thing is training people for jobs that allow them to make enough money to buy their own home, educate their own children. In other words, we don't need charity. What we need is pouring our energy into training and teaching people and then providing those jobs for those people. Now, transportation gets into that picture, but all the problems really come down to distribution of income. And so what we really need to do is train more people. And that's what I've been spending most of my time doing now, is trying to help people up the economic ladder, because that's what will make us successful. And education is part of that, but specific training is even more important. And I use the example is that Duke Power pays over $100,000 to climb telephone poles. We can't get enough people to do that. So we're not training. You gotta have some math. You have to know a little bit about arithmetic and electricity. So it takes education, but the jobs are there, but we need more training. That's what I think. That's what I'm working on, in other words.
Andrea, what are you excited about for Charlotte outside of the transportation situation? What gets you excited about this city?
I'm excited when I look around this room and I see the future leaders of our city. What I want to see as we move forward is more people out in the community, people on nonprofit boards. I'm looking around here at the front row. I've been on pretty much all these boards of people I see over here over time. But that was something the company really pushed. And so we, at one point, I remember we looked and we had over 250 Native American people on nonprofit boards in Charlotte. Get involved. That's what I'm excited about. The young people getting involved, the brains that you all are bringing to the table, the things that you know that we don't know that are going to be part of our evolution as a city. Embracing AI, you all are at the epicenter of that, and I think it's hugely exciting for us and for this community. I do want to just double click on one thing you said on education. Anybody that wants to volunteer and help kids learn to read, we have got to get our third graders reading at a third grade level. That we've learned that is a driver for getting kids through high school. And there's just so many opportunities here. I hope that I see all of you out and about, and I know you're going to do great things. And I think Charlotte, as you started, Rick, is a great city. I think we can be even greater, and I want it to be a place where everyone feels like they can succeed here. So.
Amen.
You know, I think Charlotte in 25 years has a chance to be the greatest city in this country because of what it provides to the people that live here. And I think we're on our way there. I think a lot has to do with leaders like both of you who have gone above and beyond at leaving the woodpile higher. Today is an honor to have you here for me, and I know for my teammates. Thank you for coming.
Thank you,
Andrea. Thank you very much.
See you at the back.